Well, good day and welcome back. You've seen both of these typewriters before individually, but I thought it would be fun today to compare them together. So on your right is the 1938 Royal Varsity. On your left is the 1938 Royal Model O. These were both portable typewriters made by Royal in the Depression era prior to World War II. Let's look at them together, shall we? Stay tuned. Well, of course, one of the dramatic things I noticed about the Varsity on your right was how small it was compared to what I remembered these portable Royals looking like. We have some dimensions here to compare. On your right is the Varsity, on the left is the Model O. The length from front to back on the Varsity is 265 millimeters. On the Model O is 283 millimeters, the difference of 18 millimeters longer front to back on the Model O. So the width from carriage knob to carriage knob, I'm not counting the carriage return levers, 298 millimeters for the Varsity, 307 millimeters wide for the Model O, so the Model O is 9 millimeters wider. The height, and again, I'm not counting the tip of the carriage return lever, I'm really talking about from the top of the carriage down to the feet. The Varsity is 120 millimeters tall. The Model O is 125 millimeters tall, so the Model O is 5 millimeters taller. And then the weight. The Varsity is 4.32 kilograms. The Model O is 4.87 kilograms, so a difference of about 550 grams, over a pound heavier for the Model O. Well, it's a good time now to compare features, and back by popular demand is the little cardboard pointing finger. So the Varsity on your right, the Model O on your left. The Varsity has a backspace key. And of course the Model O has a backspace key also. But what the Model O also has that the Varsity doesn't is it has, of course, a margin release, which is missing from the Varsity. It has a touch adjustment and it has a bichrome adjustment. All of those are missing on the Varsity. Now the keys are essentially identical as far as I can tell. They're round, they have the clear covering on them, they have the metal rings, they're beautiful. And the touch on both of these machines feels very similar, but I would say the Varsity's is, at least where I have the Model O right now, the Model O is a little bit lighter of a touch. Yeah, I can get the Model O to have as heavy of a touch as the Varsity, but you have to turn the touch up quite a bit. So the Varsity is a little bit stiffer of a feel, but they're both pretty comfortable to use. One other difference you might notice is that the space bar on the Model O is a little bit wider, but it also tapers out to thinner thickness toward the ends. Whereas on the Varsity, the space bar is a little bit narrower, but it just has this semicircular rounded shape. They both have the same kind of shifting and shift lock mechanism, very similar. They're both carriage shifted machines. And they both have the single card holder finger up here on the right, just to the right of the type guide, for helping to put a card of some kind of small piece of paper. They both have the round rod type paper bail with two rubber rollers that are adjustable. The carriage return lever on the Varsity is shorter than the carriage return lever on the Model O. It is noticeably bigger. In fact, the Model O, the tip of the carriage return lever comes out to about over halfway out toward the front of the ribbon cover, whereas on the Varsity, it only comes about a third of the way out from the back of the ribbon cover. Both the Varsity and the Model O have a single double line spacing selector switch, and they both have a line spacing variable disconnect. On the Model O, the disconnect lever is this one behind the line spacing lever, and on the Varsity, it's in front of the line spacing lever. But the Model O has an additional disconnect button on the middle of the left knob, so the lever up here is a temporary line spacing disconnect. The button is a permanent one, so the Varsity doesn't have the clutch for the permanent line spacing disconnect. The margin settings on the Varsity are behind the machine. You have to reach up, look back behind the machine, or go by feel in order to adjust the margin settings. Whereas on the Model O, you tip the back paper table back like that, and it exposes both margin settings so you can adjust them from the front so they are visible. There's also a scale on the paper table that corresponds to the margin settings for the Model O, whereas on the Varsity it doesn't have a paper scale on the paper table. And there is a ribbon reversing lever on the Model O up front here. Well, the Varsity has the little ribbon reversing button on the sides of the body. I'm pointing to it right here. You push it in that way and push it in that way. So it does have a manual ribbon reverse. It's just not quite as convenient to reach as on the Model O. Another difference is the feet. So the front feet on the Model O are back here underneath the back row of keys. So the front of the keyboard, the whole front quarter of the machine, cantilevers out in front of the front feet, which means you could set the front feet on the edge of a table and have the keyboard cantilevered out beyond the edge of the table if you wanted to type like this. Whereas on the Varsity, the front feet are right up here on the front corners of the frame outboard of the space bar. So there's no cantilevering of the keyboard on the Varsity. And I suppose it might be a good opportunity to compare the sound of the bells. Nice and bright. So on these two machines at least, I don't know how much sample-to-sample variation there is, but the Model O is a higher pitch. What is it, half a note, maybe? That almost sounds like a major key, and that's a minor key. Oh, that's interesting. So if you were going to form your own typewriter orchestra, you might want to consider both of these machines to be able to get two different notes on the scale. Well, aesthetically, you might prefer the shiny paint finish over the textured paint finish, but I do notice that it's much easier to get fingerprints on the shiny finish, and also it just seems like it's more demanding of constantly needing attention so it stays shiny, whereas the textured finish is just a lot less demanding of one's time as far as, there's a fingerprint here or there. You don't have that with the textured finish. And I gotta say, I really like this finer, smoother texture than what you might see with the 1950s Smith Corona typewriters, for instance. This, if you get the forward scattering of light coming off of it, it has a really nice sheen to the textured finish, which is really lovely. Now, these two machines have had a different history despite the fact they're both made in 1938. This Varsity belongs to a local collector that's part of our Albuquerque Typewriter Society, and this has been professionally serviced by master technician John Lewis, whereas this machine was, quote, serviced, unquote, by yours truly, and actually, this is an elite typeface, 12 characters per inch. This is pica or 10. This one is a little more finicky with regards to how fast you type. I can over-type this touch typing, and I'm not a great touch typist speed-wise, but I can out-type it so it starts to pile on a little bit of letters. So this machine in this condition really kind of likes two-finger typing to make it neater, whereas this machine, being more professionally serviced, types wonderfully. So there you can see I have rapidly touch typing with the Model O, and I am getting some piling on of letters here besides my typographical errors, but this machine in its current state just doesn't put up with rapid staccato-like typing action. It really wants a smoother, slower action. And this bottom paragraph is where I have slowed down with two-finger typing on the Model O, and it definitely spaces much neater, much more consistently, indicating that it just can't put up with really rapid typing in its current condition. Whereas the Varsity here is a pica typeface instead of Elite. It is larger characters, but it also types neater and spaces more consistently when you're rapidly touch typing. So I think the Model O is one of the most beautiful pre-war typewriters ever, but something attracts me to the Varsity because of its humble simplicity, its unassuming nature. It's not pretending to be something that it isn't. It's barely enough features to be a usable writer's tool, and it's just so small and compact. It's just lovely to look at. Not taking anything away from the Royal O, of course, but there's just something special about the smaller, lighter Varsity that I really like. And I want to thank my friend Matt for letting me borrow this machine for this video. I think they're great typewriters to have in your collection if you like pre-World War II portable typewriters, and these are a great example. You couldn't do wrong to have either or both of these in your collection. And of course, a lot of times, how we get along with a typewriter has as much to do with our personal feelings about the aesthetics of the machine as it does with the practicality of the features. Because it's hard to be creative when you just don't like the machine. But if you love the looks of it, it's a lot easier to sit down at it and start writing. And that's what I invite you to do. Sit down at your typewriter, stay creative, and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.